best players from the rest of the world come here to prove themselves.
Welcome one and all to the moment you have all been waiting for.
Me and Titan especially went nuts.
It's a hill for Grabstar. They're just falling like flies.
The enemy top laner trash talked him. We can't let them trash talk one of ours.
And so well played by Red Cannons. Hawa tried so hard, but LNG, they've got the Baron, they've got the Ocean Soul, and they're looking to take the base.
对于我们是配合很多的一个队伍，然后他们可能相对来说还就挺好处理的吧。
The Nexus will fall in favor of LPL in this absolutely historic bout between these two regions.
이제 두 경기를 끝내고 이제 기분을 이제 경기력만 놓고 봤을 때 기분이 그렇게 좋진 않네요.
That slicing maelstrom was so beautiful. Clean ace from the TCL.
Going into Worlds, having a lot of expectations, we've come up short several times. O sene bu sene.
TCL #1 seed will take their first game here at Worlds. Gang caught out. It's a triple. Perks makes a statement on his return to Worlds.
If we can make it out, we're gonna be held as the best any team ever. That will be a pretty good achievement.
지금 일단 눈앞에 있는 문제부터 해결해야 될 것 같습니다.
No, it's the pinnacle of competing.
Their road to eternal glory is far from over. It all leads to this.
Vitality will take them!
Une nouvelle ère approche.
Welcome back to Worlds 2021, taking place in scenic Reykjavik, Iceland. Our first day back on the world stage gave us redemption, rockstar rookies, and a few surprises. Here we see Peace and Hanwha Life Esports arriving at the arena ahead of our first match of the day. Both teams ready to fight for their spot at the top of the world. I am Dash, and I'm joined today by LEC's Goldberg and LCS's very own Kaizen. And gentlemen, I am ecstatic to be jumping on the analyst desk with you two to preview the 8 games that we have ahead of us today. But with that, gents, we're going to dive right into it. We got a lot to cover. Let's start by getting a look at how our groups are stacking up after our first day. It's LNG who landed the first blow in that battle between LPL and LCK and now lead Group A, followed by CBLOL's Red Canids. And then, of course, on the other side in Group B, Galatasaray entered with a bang to collect that clean 2-0 scoreline. And Goldberg, that's where I want to start. Galatasaray surprising many yesterday.
I mean, they're surprising me as well. They were one of those teams that I took a look at the beginning when we came in towards their own TCL playoffs, and they had a very slow, methodical style. I thought this style would get punished when we got to a bigger stage, but honestly, they adapted of some of these weaknesses that they had in their regular season. All of a sudden, Balulu, with the priority he got in the mid lane, actually moving it around with the map with his jungler Mojito as well, who is more known in the past to just farm up for himself. So Galatasaray really coming together as a team and surprising a lot of us.
I mean, not only did this shirk kind of the expectation of the group, but Kaizen, it now throws the whole group into kind of a turmoil in a sense. Like, there's no expectation left in terms of who's going to get out.
Absolutely not. I think going into that day, people were expecting that, Destination Focus Me with their full roster would be a threat, Cloud9 would be a threat, but people were kind of sleepy on Galatasaray. And I think to emphasize what Goldberg just said, it's not just that they've played well, it's that they've adapted their style and they've shown us an entirely different look that I don't think a lot of teams could have anticipated from them.
I mean, from there, you mentioned Cloud9, and they definitely impressed in day one. However, it was only a singular victory. But I think, Goldberg, there were a lot of questions about this roster, given their domestic performance and how they kind of waffled in the LCS.
Yeah, to me, this was a fresh breeze of air, really, with Cloud9. I think towards the LCS, at times they seemed disjointed and like they wasn't really on the same page. But coming in yesterday, I think Forge as an individual did an amazing job, and his team did an amazing job capitalizing on it. We saw Perks in the mid lane actually utilizing his pressure elsewhere on the map instead of just trying to get a lead for himself in the mid game. So Cloud9 really really coming together on the same page finally.
Yeah, getting a win in their first match on the international stage since MSI is going to be a boon for the roster. And I'll remind everyone, Kaizen, that at MSI back in Iceland a few months ago, it was Fudge and Vulcan who were kind of touted as the top performers on the team, and once again we saw them living up to that.
Thank you for the reminder. I agree. To see Fudge continue to be a carry for the team. You know, I think over the course of this year, he's gone from being what was honestly a liability for Cloud9 to a stable top laner to a straight-up carry. And it's nice to see Cloud9 decide, hey, we're just going to invest in this guy continually, game after game. What I love to see, especially, is the coordination between Blabber and Fudge, really timing around the wave, looking for opportunities to set up dives. So I love to see that. Keep doing it.
I'll add to that as well that we saw Perks roaming. In fact, in his interview with Lore, he kind of made it a point to say, well, I wasn't even really laning. I was playing for the sides. And again, that's a stark contrast to me, Goldberg, from what we saw in the LCS domestically, where it seemed that they couldn't settle on a singular playstyle.
Yeah, it just seemed like they had different ideas coming into it. And when they had a different idea, it was like everyone wasn't really on the same page. But as you said yourself, just the fact that he was willing to go down at points in the game, he was 20 CS down just because he had used a lot of time to roam down towards this bottom side, or because he had absorbed so much pressure. 4 minutes, 5 minutes into the game, 4 people from the enemy team was there trying to dive him. And it's this pressure that he does well when he absorbs it, and he does well when he's able to utilize his own pressure for his teammates out on the map.
Everything in service of a victory there on day number 1. But with day 1 of Worlds done and dusted, our picture of the international meta is starting to solidify. Here, of course, you'll see a number of the picks we had our eyes on yesterday. Misfortune, Set, Amumu, just to name a few, but there were many. And I guess my question is, how big of an impact did they really have here at the beginning of play-ins, and how will this meta evolve?
I think for yesterday, at least with all the champions we got to see, it's this kind of playoffs or play-ins rather, where we don't really know yet what's going to solidify themselves. Teams are still trying it out in scrims, they're still trying it out in stage. We saw it last year with Echo as well, so I still think we will see development in terms of the meta.
Well, Kaizen, let's start in the jungle, because it was assassins galore yesterday.
Yeah, and I love to see it. Yeah, and I think this is the effect of Ghostblade. You know, we're seeing a lot more mobility, high single target DPS junglers, and this is a meta that allows mechanically proficient junglers to shine. Yesterday we saw Steel in the mid game completely turning the game around for his team from a deficit by just constantly looking for picks on side lanes, and the mobility of champions like Talon, like Kiana, is what's going to allow the better junglers in the tournament to be able to turn the games for their team.
I mean, explosive damage with high mobility out of these assassin junglers makes for a very exciting game, and in some cases very quick games when they get the ball rolling. But I want to kind of contrast that to what we're seeing on the bottom side of the map, Goldberg, where you have things like the Misfortune and the Amumus, the things that have been talked about. Would we see them at Worlds, and how prevalent and how effective would they be? But to me, that's a very interesting contrast between team fight setup and junglers who want to skirmish and kind of take advantage of 1v1.
Yeah, but I feel like at the same time, a lot of this comes from pressure. A lot of this comes about the ability to roam around the map. We've already seen the things with Talent. Misfortune as an AD coming into this one also have this mobility on the map with her W. It's super easy for her to get priority, super easy for her to roam around the map. And then it's the flexibility we see with the champion as well in terms of what the team needs. We saw Kraken Slayer, we saw Gale Force yesterday, we saw the lethality, which is really the rise of Misfortune, where it started to come through with the Yumas, Ghostblade buffs, the easy build pathing now, so you don't have to go and get a pickaxe, but you can actually start building up from these long shots. It's make it super easy for you to accelerate a lead if you get it, and I think that's why Misfortune has been so prevalent, especially with all these engage support that, you know, they were already meta. Now let's just top a bullet time on top of it.
All right, yeah, that's the ticket right there, right? The engage supports. And I'm going to call out one in particular, Kaizen. That's the Amumu, because again, an exciting, tiny rework for the champion, brings him down into the support position. And while he was played a number of times yesterday, not to great success.
Yeah, and I think some context is important here. I think part of the reason, honestly, he wasn't played to great success is because he was played by the weaker team in a lot of these matchups. 2 of the losses were to Hanolife and LNG. I don't think it's reflective of the strength of the pick. I think this is a very strong pick. The fact that he has double bandage toss and has such a forgiving play pattern when it comes to looking for engages means that he's going to continue to be a high impact pick, especially with, as Goldberg said, the synergy that he has with MF. We're going to see a lot lot of curses of a sad bullet time.
Yeah, we'll hold off on overreacting to the meta stuff here after just 8 games and day number 2. But while we have plenty of opinions about the meta, we are going to check in with Chovy and get his thoughts on the power of Tryndamere here at Worlds.
So let's talk about the game a bit more. We saw a lot of diversity on the mid lane so far with the range matchup, the melee matchup, both AD and AP. But one pick that stands out for the audience is Tryndamere, of course. So I want to have your thoughts on this champion because you played it on the first game. And how strong do you think it is compared to the other champions that we've seen so far?
네, 우선은 게임적인 질문을 드리고 싶은데 지금 미드에서 굉장히 다양한 픽이 보여지고 있는 것 같습니다. 브루도 나오고 AP도 나오고 AD 챔피언도 많이 나오고 있는데 아무래도 가장 궁금한 부분은 첫 번째 경기에서 플레이한 트린다미어 같아요. 트린다미어가 지금 다른 미드픽에 비교해서 얼마나 강하다고 생각하시나요?
일단 트린다미어가 일단 확실히 라인전도 쉽게 안 뚫리고 이제 후반에 성장했을 때 잠재력이 굉장히 좋다고 생각하고 근데 이제 또 이게 막상 그렇게 아예 상대 못할 정도는 아니라서 그냥 좀 이제 비교적 좋은 그냥 뽑을 만한 픽이라고까지만 생각합니다.
So I think he's really solid in lane, and also once he hits the power spike, he has a very high potential in the late game. But I'm not saying he's like unbeatable or too OP. So I think it's just relatively good and pretty just decent and okay.
Couple quick thoughts from Chovy on the Tryndamere pick in the mid lane, which we love to see that kind of innovation here on the world stage. Some of the greatest moments in the history of Worlds come from interesting meta developments and the willingness of some players to pull out something a little funky. I will say personally, I'm waiting for that Vi mid. I hope we get it.
I mean, you might still wait for it just a little bit, but it's still early in play-ins as you've already established. We are only on day 2. We've got loads of game to get covered. So, I mean, if we are going to see it, I think play-ins is the place to start.
There's a chance, baby. There's a chance. All right, well, Chovy and all of Hanwha Life Esports will face 2 important opponents today in Peace and Red Canids. But later on, we've got our featured matchup presented by Mercedes-Benz, where we will see Cloud9 fight to make a statement against the projected Group B powerhouse Beyond Gaming.
I definitely think it's a game as well where, you know, we've already established Cloud9, you know, coming in as this team where, you know what, they actually exceeded the expectations that I had to them. But on the other end of Beyond Gaming, I think they surprised me in a negative way yesterday, but they did also have a substitute top laner today. They are bringing in Liang. So maybe we finally get to see this powerhouse of a region that I still believe PCS is, because I think a lot of the region yesterday after their loss already had a lot of criticism to them. And I think it's a bit too early for that just yet. We still have loads to see from this region.
That said, though, Kaizen, I feel like we have to talk about how quickly the pressure and the stakes ramp up here in the play-in stage. With the first couple results already coming in and the race to make it through to those series, every match matters from this point onward.
Absolutely, but first, I'm not going to let Goldborg get away with that. Cloud9 did not perform above expectations. That was at expectations. That's what Cloud9 expected to see. And beyond that, yeah, look, these are long days, and at the end of each day, there's going to be huge movement of the standings. So you need to be on point for every single game. I'm looking at Peace versus Hanwha Life Esports. A lot of the time when you have these David versus Goliath matchups, you say, okay, well, you could expect to lose that and then you'll make it up elsewhere. You don't really have the luxury of that in the play-in. It's a single round robin. You have one shot to beat every team in front of you. So every game, I expect teams to play their style and play ideally aggressively when you're the underdog.
All right, well, I'm going to follow your lead here, and let's dive into that very first matchup. We're only a few minutes away from Hanwha Life's first match of the day against the LCO's Peace, but they're going to have to shore up their drafting if they want to build momentum and catch up to cross-region rivals LNG in the standings. Again, re-hitting that point that having dropped the game against LNG Goldberg, these matches matter quite a bit.
Yeah, they definitely do. As Kaizen already mentioned, you only play them once. This is a single round robin, and that's it. Of course, there is still a head-to-head to go into it, but I think as well, like taking a look at the screen from what we saw of their drafting yesterday, we're looking at a full AD composition. You're looking at a composition where you want to play the map. You also play into a Jax that just outscaled you on the side. But even then, when they had their lead, it's like they fumbled in the decision-making and decided to say, you know what, let's play this composition as a teamfight composition instead. And because of that, they allowed LNG to get back into the game, specifically around all these Drake fights.
Yeah, I mean, again, such a highlight on the fact that it is the single round robin. And so while it's great to see teams drafting with intent and purpose, again, Kaizen, it puts the onus on them to live up to that intent that they drafted with.
Absolutely. And as far as intent goes, I like what we were seeing from Peace yesterday. Like, I like the fact that they're willing to put Bobip on Zed. You know, he's a carry jungler. He's someone who was playing Hecarim and Zinzao and these sorts of picks. And I like the fact that they are willing to play some of the picks that are more solo queue oriented, particularly in a situation where you might be the underdog. So I want them to keep the intent. Where we need to see improvement is the coordination from a team perspective. To Goldborg's point about Hanwha Life Esports, Peace is also seeing the same issues with just not being on the same page. And I think in their case, they get a little bit more of a pass because they're not playing with their typical top laner. But Vizicsacsi is a more than competent top laner, so it's not really an excuse, and they need to figure out a way to get it all together in time.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. But, you know, my only concern I had with Peace, and I almost feel bad for, you know, critiquing a team obviously coming in from OC as well. They were playing against a stronger team. But I just wish that I got to see that fire that we usually see from OC. If you make a mistake, do it confidently, be aggressive, have that intent to play the draft that you came in with. Because yesterday, I saw the intent. I didn't see any execution. I didn't see any fire. So today, you know, guns blazing, straight out the gate, play for your win conditions.
Yes, absolutely. Typically, when we talk about underdog teams getting victories on the international stage, it's because they're taking risks, right? We love to talk about teams like Gigabyte Marines and the inventive strategies and then the confidence that they're willing to play with behind that creativity. And Kaizen, again, in a matchup like this where you look at Hanwha Life Esports as definitely being the favorite against Peace, you have to wonder, will they come out with enough firepower, to actually put Hanwha Life on the back foot?
They had better. I want less peace, more violence from this team.
Yes, please.
What they should be looking for is opportunities to snowball the game as early as possible. Again, we talked about the meta being around Ghostblade junglers. And the nice thing about a Ghostblade jungler meta is if you just have a few early good ganks, you can really run over the game. And I think that was the idea with having Bobip on Zed. I would like to see him maybe pull out a Talon or a Kiana, just something that's really disruptive, because at the end of the day, Hanwha Life Esports might be the better team most games, but they're still a team with a lot of weaknesses. They're still a Chovy-oriented team. They don't necessarily have the teamwork that you would expect to see out of a top team. So there are weaknesses that can be exploited here, and I want to see Peace look to exploit them by being as aggressive as possible.
You know, it's funny as well, because if you take a look back to the playoffs matches with Peace as well, a lot of their strengths came from the mid lane, but he's a bit unorthodox, right? Because Tali is a former top laner, the role swapped into the mid lane, and this also shows in his champion pool. He doesn't really play mages. He plays melee brawlers, or he plays champion that's able to roam. And he did play the Galio yesterday, but we just never got to see the roam. Same thing can be said about their bot lane. When you spoke to all the other OC teams about Peace as a team, they said that the bot lane was the only part of Peace that was willing to send it, right? So this aggression, this point of weakness that you can attack, I want to see them move it down to the bot lane if you can. Have Vizicsacsi on that GP again, and then pull the trigger with these global ultimates to finally shine through with the style that we have seen work from OC at times.
I think it's going to be an interesting contrast between these teams as we look for Peace to make something happen from the jungle, possibly down towards the bot lane. And as already mentioned, Hanwha Life Esports very centered around Chovy, so we'll see what he can get done today. But all in all, we'll see whether Hanwha Life Esports can continue to push ahead, or if Peace will stand in their way and claim their first win at Worlds as we dive into day 2.